I stuck with it. I committed to it because I'd already started. So it wasn't a fail. It was a story of triumph. That fact that I continued, I baked the mistake, and it worked out great. Coming up, celebrities who can't quite get a hang on baking, baking fails across the internet, and tips on how to become a more confident baker. That and everything else you need to know. Hi everyone, welcome back to Need to Know. I am Gemma Stafford, professional chef, host of Bigger Bolder Baking and cookbook author. And today I'm here with my two lovely co-hosts, Ami Shukla, who is the culinary director for Bigger Bolder Baking, and of course Tianna, who is a professional host but an amateur baker. So here we are, ladies, back again.
Back again. I'm really excited to talk about every topic in today's episode. We have a lot of fun things, so I'm going to jump right into hot from the oven. So we all know American actor and comedian Sean Hayes from Will and Grace, and he also is one of the hosts of the Smartless podcast, and he talks often about how much of a sweet tooth he has on his podcast. He's a big sweets guy, and so I was doing a little research on him, and I found two hilarious videos that he has posted on YouTube that I wanted to share with you. So the first one, it's like a duet with Gordon Ramsay. Gordon Ramsay's talking about how to make like fried donuts. And they come out in these beautiful, perfect little balls. And so then Sean Hayes, it cuts to him and he's like, "What do you think? These look like donuts." And it cuts to his donuts and they look like light bulbs. Like they're round on top, and then they have like these long tails, and they almost look like something out of a Tim Burton movie, like the way they're all shaped. And then that's it. The video's over. And then his second one that he posted was, "Good morning. Like we're gonna make some waffles here. It's a beautiful morning." And he cuts to his like waffle maker, and he opens the waffle maker, and it's just all like melted and stuck onto the waffle maker. And he's like, "Well, what do you think?" And that's it. And it's just these two hilarious baking fail videos. And it just made me love him so much more than I already did, because I think we don't talk, like baking fails is like a big trend, but people aren't flying it on a flagpole when they completely mess up a recipe, you know? And so I thought it'd be really fun to kind of talk about just like general baking fails. So I wanted to start. Do either of you have any recent baking fails?
I have a lot of baking fails from over the years. I will say that my baking fail recently ended up being a success. And I posted this on my Instagram and I got really good engagement, and I posted it over a few days. So I really hooked people in. I didn't even realize that it was going to be a thing. But long story short, in a moment of stupidity, I added in the salt. I added in 2 teaspoons of yeast to my no-knead pizza dough, and which it was supposed to be 1/4 teaspoon of yeast because it's a no-knead dough, so you need very little. So I added 8 times the amount of yeast that I needed.
Oh my gosh.
It's such a great dough that I was like, you know what? I'm going to keep going. I'm going to see, like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? It's going to multiply and taste like yeast. Like, I don't know. So I stuck with it. I committed to it because I'd already started. And then the day I was baking it, I told Kevin, he was like, "Wait, is that the dough? You're still going to cook it?" And I was like, yeah, like, I don't think this is going to be catastrophic. And anyway, needless to say, a little while later, I think Kevin and I both agreed, and George ate a whole pizza to himself. Some of the best pizzas I have ever made.
Oh my gosh.
And you could not taste the yeast. They were lovely and bubbly and light. And I had no idea. I had no idea. So it wasn't a fail. It was a story of triumph. That fact that I continued, I baked the mistake, and it worked out great.
That's great. Do you have any, Ami?
I can think of 2. First off, I'll say, I'm glad I made the mistakes because now I know. So the first one was I was making a pan of butter mochi, and the milk I was using was cold. So I put it in the microwave to warm it up for 30 seconds, and I made the rest of my batter. I've made butter mochi many times without fail, and poured it into the pan. I was like, wow, this dough is so much thicker. Whatever. And then I baked it, and then I went to go warm something else up in the microwave, and I found the milk that I forgot to put in the butter mochi, and I was like halfway done baking, and I thought, well, let's see what happens. Maybe it'll be delicious. It was not, but now I know.
Now you know.
Gosh.
But the other time was last Thanksgiving. I was making a pie. I was making an apple pie. It was a lattice top, and I put it all together, and I worked really hard on the lattice top. And then I put it in the oven, and then realized I forgot to put any thickener. I forgot to put cornstarch in it, with all the stuff I was mixing together.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I can either just bake it and see what happens, or, then I thought, what if I mix a little cornstarch with a little bit of, just a tiny bit of water, and then pour it through the lattice? Like maybe it'll kind of combine with the apple and thicken. So that was a fail. It didn't.
I was like, wow, that sounds like such a good
Don't
idea.
do that. So I would say, if you forget to add the thickener in your pie, it will probably be a little runny and it'll probably still be delicious. Don't try to add the cornstarch in later. But now I know.
Well, I want to share a few more fun baking fails that I found on TikTok. And if you are listening to this, check the show notes. All these links to all these TikToks and Sean Hayes' videos will be there for you to watch and enjoy. So the first one was a woman tried to make gluten-free cupcakes, and she put her cupcake tray in the oven, and then she went to check on it, and all the batter had melted out of the cupcake and was on the bottom of her oven. And I'm like, and my brain was like, is it because it's gluten-free? What happened? That feels like how does that even happen?
I saw this video. Did you watch this video?
I just saw the end of it.
It does not make sense to me what happened here. She opens up the oven to cupcakes that look like they evaporated out of the tin.
Yeah.
And they're crusty around the top. I mean, it makes no sense to me. I have been baking for 20 years. I've been a professional chef for 20 years. I've been baking since I was around 6 years of age in my life. And I started out making cupcakes at 6 years of age. I have never seen anything like this. It is not because they are gluten-free.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what she did, but something's not right.
Was there anything left in the muffin tins, or they were all completely
Just
out?
the top.
Every single thing was
Right.
empty, and it was kind of bubbling.
Yeah.
It was so weird.
That made me think, was her oven too hot? Was she trying to bake them?
Something more powerful intervened here. You have to watch this video because it just blows my mind. Where are the cupcakes?
Oh, yeah, where did they go?
And her oven wasn't smoking or anything, but whatever was left in the tin was kind of bubbling.
Yeah.
And the batter wouldn't bubble it was liquid. It was just bizarre.
Well, go watch the video. Let us know what you think happened. The second one, this next one, I actually feel on a personal level because I am not a good decorator of cakes. So the TikTok sound was like, this is what I wanted. This is what I got, or this is what I was trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this beautiful cake that is covered in fresh strawberries and blueberries, and it's gorgeously around the cake perfectly. And then it cuts to this woman's cake, and it's the whole cake looks like it's melting. All the berries are sliding off of
she
it.
put it on a hot cake.
Yeah.
I don't understand how else that would have happened.
Yeah.
Did you see this?
Yeah, and it was tiny also.
I mean, okay, but why would a frosting melt like that?
I don't know.
At first I thought, was it that the berries watered out? But I've put berries on top of frosting before, and that's never happened to me. The only thing I could think of was she didn't let the cake cool down.
But homie, it didn't even look like a proper cake. It looked like a cupcake or something. It was tiny.
Was it? I don't remember.
It was
it was small.
The example cake was this big, and then her cake was down. I mean,
It was tiny.
It looked like a
and
melting
melted.
snowman, kind of.
Yeah.
But I felt that one because
I've done
that would happen
cakes.
to me.
That's happened
Lesson
to me.
learned: let your cakes thoroughly cool before you frost them.
I've had my biggest fails have been with cakes
Mhm.
because I'm not a cake decorator. So I've been in positions, and I have before. I made this chocolate and orange cake for the website. This is a good few years ago now. And it was 3 layers. It was heavy. The frosting squished out. It was leaning over to one side, and we were just trying to capture. It's let's just get it standing for a few seconds so we can get the shot. And another fail I had was when I did the cupcake bouquet, which was absolutely gorgeous on the front. On the back, there was no back to the bouquet, all because it was 90 degrees in my kitchen in Santa Monica. the cupcakes and the frosting, the frosting melted off the cupcakes.
Oh my gosh.
The back of the cake was bare. We had to freeze the cupcakes, and Kevin and I were like, just get it done. Just get it done, and we can end this video.
Yeah.
My biggest fails, I could go on and on and on. I remember doing a Food Network Live one time, and my cake was leaning, and it was about to fall over, and it was so bad I couldn't even cut into it. And in my ear they were saying, "Don't cut into it, don't cut into it, don't go into it, Gemma, leave it, don't cut into it,"
Oh my gosh.
because it was going to just melt apart.
Oh my gosh.
Well, do you think all of these issues were because the cake was warm, or it was warm in the
No.
studio? No, it
I
was
just don't do cakes.
Uh-huh.
I
Uh-huh.
just don't need to. No, I don't need to be a
Yeah.
part of that.
Yeah, it's hard to get a level cake. You always have to, if you're doing a layer cake, you do always have to cut the tops off and make sure they're level.
Yeah.
But that's not easy. To really get good, even level layers is challenging. It's
Yeah.
probably the hardest part of making a layer cake.
Well, the last TikTok I have, this one, she knows what she did wrong, and she says it in her video. She's like laughing as she's showing us. They honestly kind of look like, from a few episodes ago, like how we cut our banana bread. Like it looked like a slice of banana bread. And this woman is laughing hysterically. And she was like, I thought I had instant yeast, but I really only had like regular yeast that you have to like let activate. And she tried to make bread. So she had what was supposed to be like a full-on loaf of sandwich bread, and it just looks like
Stop.
yeah. And so
But it looked like she didn't even let the instant yeast proof. I think she must have misunderstood that instant yeast can just be stirred together and thrown in the oven.
well, I think she thought she had instant
She had
yeast.
instant yeast, but it turns out she had active yeast that needed to be a sponge. I will say that I've made this mistake before, just with packets in my cupboard and stuff like that, and I have had success with using active yeast as instant and not having an issue. By absolute mistake, I did it, but never having an issue. I will say, and I recommend people who are listening and watching, watch this video. There's more going on here
Yeah.
with this bread than just the yeast.
Well, sure, but also if you let the dough proof, even if you didn't activate the yeast, it would have risen, and it didn't look like.
It didn't actually proof the dough. Is that
Yes, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. It looks
Oh,
like
yeah.
she didn't even proof
No.
the dough. It looks like
multiple things.
her
Yeah.
misunderstanding of what, even if she thought she had instant yeast, you still have to proof the dough.
Mm.
So if she said, I thought I had instant yeast, did she think, stir this together, put it in a pan, and it's going to instantly rise in the oven?
Right.
That
Yeah, I think if it were more, this was my first time making bread and this is what happened, I'd be like, yeah, that's about right.
Mm-hmm.
But no, there's more things going on there.
Well, what I love about baking fail videos is that it really sparks this conversation. It makes you more open about, yeah, I made a mistake, but how can I move on from it? So we're going to move right in the mix today, because I want to talk about overcoming baking failures. So I know, Gemma, one of your a mission here at Bigger Bolder Baking is about building your confidence. And I think failure is a part of that. So how can you go into baking if you are at whatever stage of your career, whether you're an amateur, professional, how would you approach overcoming failure?
We hear this. I've been doing this for 10 years now with Bigger Bolder Baking, and we have a team of experts who answer fans' comments for the last 10 years. And I was doing that for many, many years myself. And one thing that we would hear from people is that their confidence would really get knocked. So much so that maybe they had tried a recipe before, or something seemed so daunting that they wouldn't even try it. But they really wanted to be a good baker, to learn how to bake, and whatever it was. There's a few different things. I'd say number one, depending your level, could be your age or how many years you've been baking or whatever it is, make sure the recipe is suitable for you. I wouldn't recommend a 12-year-old go into the kitchen and start making macarons, because maybe that just comes with a little bit more time and experience in the kitchen. This woman's bread that didn't come out the best, maybe that was her first loaf of bread. The best thing you can do is go back into the kitchen and try again. Definitely pick something, begin with, that's something that's more attainable, that you are more likely to have success with, because the more success you have in the kitchen, the more likely you are to go back in. And we hear this from kids, also from our younger audience. If something didn't go right, they would share it with their family, and maybe a brother or a sister said that wasn't nice. we didn't like it, or maybe it didn't work out and they and ingredients got wasted, and then they were told they weren't allowed to bake again because it didn't work out. We've heard that a lot over the years, which and then we would get the message from the child saying this, which is not okay. My mom never, when I was a child in the kitchen, she just left me in there. I don't know if out of laziness or because she was going to give me space, or she just needed a break from me. But like, I was left in there by myself to my own device night after night for years. And it was the best thing she could have done for me. So I would say, and then also when we hear from these kids, when they have successes, we get messages saying that my whole family loved it. My brother asked me to make it again. And they are so delighted, and like their cup is filled with like confidence, So I would say start out with something attainable and then build on your skills. Practice will just get you better and better. And like there's lots of things, like I was not the best cake decorator in the world. I've gotten a lot better at cake decorating. My crumb coat is pretty good right now. I can decorate a cake like pretty easily. So I would just say keep on at it. And I will say that I became a much, much better baker when I started in the last 10 years of bigger, bolder baking than I did the prior 10 years working in professional kitchens. And because I really am immersed now, the last decade, in the world of baking, and we have done thousands of recipes, Ami. I mean, just I have like 800 videos, Kevin. 800 videos, probably more with shorts and everything. We have made over 1,500 recipes for the website, I think 16 something. And like that really has made me a better baker. So stick with it. And, and then also, if you are a total beginner, you want something easy, try mug cakes. It's a low bar to get your way into the kitchen. You don't need to turn on the oven. You need a handful of ingredients, and it's a good little stepping stone into your journey of baking.
That's great.
And I would also add on, I think, finding achievable recipes is a wonderful thing to do. Keeping the stakes low. You don't necessarily want to try a brand new recipe for a special holiday or some special occasion, something that you've never tried before that might be technically difficult. Maybe then you want to go to something that doesn't feel so weighted. And maybe on a weekend afternoon, you might try to tackle a recipe that if it fails, you can still approach it as someone who's experimenting and trying to understand, share it with your family. A lot of times, I have, a handful of close friends who come over and have dinner with us very regularly. So a lot of times, if I'm trying to experiment with something, I don't think it's going to necessarily come out that great. And it's different. I'm a confident baker, but I might still make something that I know people hold me to a certain standard when I say I'm going to make something. So if I make something that isn't great, I might just say, hey, this turned out a little strange, but here, try it and tell me what you think. And invite people to really give you feedback so that you're not putting something out there as this is the best thing. I want this to be the best, but hey, let's see, does this taste good? Does it need more sugar? Does it need less this? And allow people into the conversation, whether it's a fail or a success. It can be nice. It can help you learn, and it can help ease everybody around the table, including yourself, in that it doesn't have to be perfect every time, but every time you do something, you can be learning to be better the next time.
That's a really good point.
I love that approach.
Yeah, don't let your first time making croissants be the night before you invited 20 people over for brunch. Like, don't do that to yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
But I love that idea of inviting people into the conversation. Because I find even as an amateur baker, like I bake a lot. So all my friends, they kind of have expectations with me too. Like if I make something, they're like, oh, it has to be good, or like tastes good, or they'll be like, don't you host a baking themed podcast? Like you should know what you're doing. But I'm still growing and learning. So I like that approach of this might be a little different. So let me know what you think. Have you two ever had a recipe, or do you have a recipe now that maybe you still feel like you haven't quite mastered, or it still gives you challenges? Or kind of that pause when you're like, all right, I'm going to go make this?
Absolutely. When we just mentioned croissants, I've been obsessed with learning how to make my own croissants. I, in fact, am in mid-croissant making for my 4th time right now at home. I found a different recipe. I always get to some point where like the butter starts leaking out. Like I had to like stop at some point yesterday and just put the dough in the freezer because I ran out of time. So I'll probably get back to it this weekend with this dough. And for whatever reason, I think there are phenomenal bakers in Los Angeles and amazing, amazing bakeries where they make croissants as good as anything I've ever had in Paris. So I don't know why I feel like I need to be the one to also be able to make them. But it's fun. I find it fun.
Yeah.
And this is a sort of thing where I've made, the first time I made croissants, they were good. The second time they tasted like a roll of bread. And I just, but I go back and I research and think about it, try my technique differently, learn a little bit. And my approach is sort of like, well, I may always try and fail, but it's interesting. It's interesting to me, and I want to be able to master it because it is one of my favorite pastry. I love a laminated dough, any kind of croissant, Danish, anything.
I will actually, agree with Ami that laminated doughs are something that I always steered away from. So any kind of laminated dough that we had to do here, I gave it over to Ami because she's a lot more she's not more technical when it comes to recipes, where I can be kind of like, even though I've gotten better, but when it comes to real technical stuff, Ami will get it all to the perfect size and she'll do the folding and then mine just looks a little bit like, a little bit rustic, But remember when we made laminated biscuits?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, talk about a baking fail. Oh my gosh. Do you know what? I remember that so clearly. It was a nightmare, absolute nightmare. And it wasn't because the recipe was wrong. It was because I was wrong. I didn't have enough experience making laminated doughs. And, but I kept on at it and I tested it. We were shooting. We had to stop shooting because they literally melted in the oven. The hats melted. Like they had all these beautiful layers, but
then they fell over.
They slid across the pan in layers. It was unbelievable. When the expletives coming out of my mouth when I opened up the oven, and we had Zach here with us who used to shoot with me, and he was speechless. We had to stop filming and come back another day to film them. And between those days, I had to practice and practice and practice. And actually, I ended up getting really amazing biscuits. They were laminated biscuits, which is kind of rare. You don't really see that. So I was determined to get it right. And they ended up being lovely. And actually, I think about it, like Ami said, for these kinds of recipes, and in Bigger Bolder Baking Every Day, my second book, I have a section for weekend bakes, and it's for these kinds of things. When you're having relaxing time, when you're in the house, when it's a little bit quieter, when there's not as much going on, when you've got more time to spend, when you're not working and whatever, do these kinds of doughs, do these kinds of recipes that need a little bit extra attention, need extra folding, need extra rolling. You're more likely to have success when you give them the time that they need, and usually that's over the weekend.
Mm-hmm. And in the case of those failed laminated doughs, they're all still really good. They may not be photographed well, they may not be great for a video, but I'm sure whatever slid across the pan
was delicious.
Sure, it was flaky and good. Maybe not pretty, but
there was so many layers.
Yeah.
There was so many, but they just slid like a butter landslide across the pan.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Or, you serve it and call it a fallen pastry.
Yeah.
Or what it was.
Gemma's Leaning Tower of pastry.
You just rename it.
Yeah.
That's true. That's what Tarina Allen used to say. If it doesn't work out, just rename it.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for giving your expert opinions and advice on overcoming failure in baking. One of my favorite things about Need to Know and the Bold Baking Network is we have a whole arsenal of professional chefs and bakers who provide their insight. So we're going to hear from some of them now on ways that they overcome failures in baking.
Hi, Gemma and Need to Know. My name is Vedika and I'm part of the Bold Baking Network, and I've been asked how I deal with failure when baking. So the first thing I can say is that I don't know a single baker who has gotten everything right every single time. That's really how you develop and evolve as a baker. So the first time I made cookies, I actually made them so hard that it broke off one of my sister's braces. But since then, I have learned how important oven temperature and the time at which you bake things is. The second thing is, just because it's a failure for you doesn't mean it's a failure for everyone else. A lot of the times you can salvage what you've baked and turn it into something else. So, for example, if you do make cookies that are super hard, you can turn it into an icebox cake. So there's many different creative ways of how to save what you've baked. You just need to do a quick Google search, because chances are if you failed at it, someone else has as well. When you bake things and they go wrong, it can turn into the best creations. Recently, I made a coffee and walnut cake, and I had made the icing sugar from scratch for the frosting. So it was quite gritty and it didn't eat well. So what I did was I put it in the blender in the hopes that it would become smoother. It ended up becoming sort of like a caramel. It tasted really good. So I put that on top of the cake, and it's actually one of the best cakes I've ever made. So sometimes things go wrong can actually turn out really well. If things go wrong when you're baking, don't consider it a failure. You can grow from it. Try and see if you can salvage it somehow. And sometimes failures also lead to happy creations. So that's it for now. Thanks very much, and I'll see you next time.
All right. We are back with the Bold Baking Hotline, and we have questions today from our audience, and we're still staying on this theme of baking fails and how to maybe correct some mistakes. So the first question we have is, I forgot to add chocolate chips to my cookies. Can I add toppings anytime after the fact?
I would say not really. I would say if you did your dough and it has no chocolate chips in it, that's not the end of the world. If you catch it before it goes into the oven, shove them on the top. Even pick up a ball, mix in your chips, put it in your hand, put it back on the tray. Like, that's grand. I wouldn't worry too much about that. I wouldn't halfway through the baking. Honestly, if you haven't realized at that stage, I mean, I don't know what to say about you, but then maybe take them out. I wouldn't be taking them out in the middle of the baking and shoving on chocolate chips. It's just not the same thing.
No, but you could drizzle chocolate on top. So if for some reason you scooped chocolate chip cookies and baked them, and halfway through baking realized you forgot to add the chocolate chips, they were in the microwave, or something. Referencing my other
Your milk,
fail.
yeah.
Okay,
I got it.
I would just let the cookies completely cool, melt a little chocolate, and just drizzle it on top, or just dip the bottom
Dip
half.
half in chocolate. I like the dip in half in chocolate. That sounds nice.
Yeah. So you could get the chocolate in there, or sandwich them. with a little
Also,
chocolate.
if you're talking about a chocolate chip cookie, sans chocolate, that would be a damn good cookie. Because it would be kind of like butterscotchy, salty,
Again,
buttery.
bake them and maybe they're delicious.
Sandwich with them with some ice cream, like strawberry ice cream or something, kind of like something yum.
That Gemma said it earlier, but bake your mistakes.
Yeah.
And see if.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you've come this far, like, why not?
Yeah. Great. Well,
and if you haven't baked them, for sure, you can just you need the chocolate chips in at the end anyway. So you could just put them in the dough.
Yeah. Or like what Gemma was saying, you make like an ice cream sandwich, and then you could like roll the ice cream in the chocolate chips.
Oh, yeah.
And then there you go.
I have to say, though, I'm not a big fan of that kind of texture.
An ice cream sandwich?
No, the
Like
chips
cold
are on
chocolate.
the outside.
Oh, yeah.
That's not my thing. But anyway, yes, you could do that.
You could do
or,
that.
like-
you won't do that.
No, I won't. I would do
that.
you guys can do that.
Or just like, I once had a huge cookie fail where I put too many chocolate chips in my cookies, and I felt like there wasn't enough dough per cookie, and so they kind of just
That's one of Ami's big pet peeves: too much chocolate chips.
it came out like a big mess. So then what I did was I had friends over, and so I just scooped bowls of ice cream, and then I just crumbled it on top.
See, you figured it out.
That was another fail. That was a perfect example of a fail that you turned.
I turned positive.
Yeah.
But now if they're listening, they will know my secret, but that's okay.
Stuff like that all the time. Like, I mean, it just not everything works out. Sometimes if something won't work out, I'll freeze it and I'll use it in another way, like later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I have a bundt cake I just made that I haven't done this in years, but I turned it out and half of it broke.
Oh yeah.
And I wrapped it up, put it in the freezer, made a pan of blondies or something for my event because it was very quick, and it's waiting for a chance for me to make a trifle. That's
Yeah.
what I'm doing.
That's what I do
Yeah.
when I have leftover cake. I do trifles.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Broken cake, make a trifle.
Or I will tell you with a 4.5-year-old, cake pops.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Very sweet, but kids love them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't done it with him yet, but I
Mhm.
always think I will.
Yeah.
the next time you have a fail, a leaning cake.
A leaning
And there,
cake.
there you go.
Yeah. Who wants cake pops?
Our next question is, and I feel like a lot of people will relate to this one, is I added baking powder instead of baking soda to a recipe. Can I save it?
Baking powder and baking soda are not interchangeable. They provide their purpose. They have two different purposes, and they are activated by two different ingredients. So baking powder is activated by a liquid, but baking soda has to be activated by something with an acid in it. Otherwise, it won't activate. So, say for instance, if you're making, we'll go back to cookies. If you're making cookies, baking soda, which is what I predominantly do in my cookies, gives you that lovely crinkle on the top, but gives you a gooey center. And baking powder will give you a cakier cookie. And I did make that mistake one year. I put in, don't ask me how, but I put baking powder into my cookies and they ended up being really cakey. And that is not what I want from a chocolate chip cookie. So they're not the same thing and they're not interchangeable.
However, look, so if the person put in baking powder instead of baking soda. So baking soda is about 4 times more powerful than baking powder. And if the recipe asked for baking soda, it probably also had some sort of an acid in it, if it was a good recipe.
Yeah.
It either has brown sugar or buttermilk or yogurt, lemon, something that's going to activate it. So if it's something loose, like a cake batter, you can take the amount, you can just disregard the amount of baking powder that you put in because so say you had a recipe that took a teaspoon of baking soda and you put in a teaspoon of baking powder. It's just such a tiny amount of leavening that you could just add the correct amount of baking soda. And what you would do is you would mix it with just a few drops of water to liquefy it and then mix it right away into your batter. And you're probably okay. You can do that.
Have you tried that before?
Yes, you can do that. That's okay. If it was the other way around, if you put in baking soda instead of baking powder, you might have a problem because the baking soda is so much more powerful than the baking powder.
Yeah.
Also, if the recipe asks for baking powder, it may not necessarily have an acid.
So whatever it is not going to rise.
Maybe, yes. Or, you could then throw in, say you added baking soda instead of baking powder. First of all, it would be way too strong. But you could try adding a little bit of lemon into that batter or something to try to activate it, see what happened. But chances are you're going to have too much of a rise.
So the best thing I think actually is why don't we just take a moment and I'll give you a visual of what will happen when each raising agent has the appropriate things that it needs to activate.
That would be great.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay, ladies, we're going to do a little science experiment. For those who are listening without a video, I'm going to explain this to you. I have 2 bowls here, and into each bowl, I'm going to put a tad bit of water. Now, here I have baking powder. Baking powder reacts in liquid. So when I add this baking powder into this water, it should react. Ready? Now, see the way it's bubbling up like that?
Mm-hmm.
And it's getting all fizzy. I'll give it a bit of a stir. That means that it's active. And also, this is a good tip if you haven't baked in a year and it's the holiday season, which it is coming up soon. This is how you can tell if your baking powder and baking soda are still active. So there we go. Baking powder activates in a liquid, fizzing. Okay, now let's do baking soda. Okay. Baking soda needs an acid to activate, not just water. So watch this. So there we go. See that?
Wow.
So it's just sitting there. It's not activating because it needs more than that. It needs acid. So this is why they're not interchangeable. Now here, watch this. I have a little bit of distilled white vinegar.
Oh, wow. You can hear it.
You need the acid. This is why you can't use one for the other. They have to have the appropriate things that they need to be able to activate, to be able to leaven your cookies, your quick bread, your cake, whatever it is. So there you go. The more you know.
Yeah, I needed to know that one. And that was such a great visual.
It's a good visual, right?
Yeah.
I'm all about a visual.
The vinegar one, I was saying to Ami, it kind of reminds me of when you're like in school and you make a volcano.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I do this all the time.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Gemma and Ami. And thank you to everyone for listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, rate, and review us anywhere you listen to podcasts. And of course, you can always watch every episode of Need to Know on YouTube.
From HRN and the Bold Baking Network, you are watching the Need to Know Baking Entertainment podcast.